Next up, we have the great debate. Will generative AI change the world for better or worse? I know it's a pretty hot topic. And moderating the panel, we have Raskin, the founder of Virtual Events Group. And so with that, she'll introduce the others, and let's bring them on up.
Thanks. So, yes, I am your moderator, and this started out as a debate, but wound out as being a debate with their Jiminy Crickets and their other Jiminy Crickets. So this is a debate, an internal debate. And the other thing that you should know before I introduce everybody is that we're going to look outside of the XR world, because I think the most important thing you can do when watershed moments like this happen, like generative AI and ChatGPT in particular, is to look across industries at what the thinking is and what's being done, but then take it back and apply it to the reason we're all here and how the generative AI chatbots and stacks will affect your world. So just to frame this, AI, not so new. It's been around for a long time. Defense Department's been using it. Your cars have it. I won't say her name because she'll probably go off somewhere, but your home assistants have it. It is what is new, and I've been doing this for a long time as the former editor of PC Magazine when Bill Gates was writing DOS. What is new, and you can mark your calendars down, November 22nd, 2022, when the first generative AI, ChatGPT, was unleashed in a public beta, basically, has ramifications that are astounding. So I'm going to introduce the panelists in a minute, but first I want you to sort of look inward for a minute and we get a sense of who we're talking to. So anybody in this room not used a generative AI program yet? No shame. Okay. Has everybody incorporated some form of generative AI into their workflow? Show of hands, and we'll go quickly. Text, images, video, got a good smattering, and we'll talk about those others. Anybody using like a ChatGPT or a Bard or instead of their traditional search browser? Actually, quite a few, which is another frightening thought. And how many are excited about the AI future? Let's see how schizophrenic this audience is. How many are losing sleep over the AI future? Okay, a few, so not as schizophrenic as you might think. And finally, and this is on my card, how many of you, well, we talked about, you're using generative AI in building immersive worlds? Show of hands. All right, so this is going to be great. And I want to introduce you to our panelists, and I'll take it Louis Rosenberg, and he's going to tell you a little bit about what he is working on, but think about the collective mind swarm meets AI, and then some. He's going to be my doom and gloom guy to a bit, talking about the dangers we face. Gigi Johnson, professor mixed media for a long time, and her company Rethink is looking at creativity and media. David Cohn, let me see if I get the story right, advanced publications, but really, which is Condé Nast and others, but really looking at the future of journalism and AI. And Maya Ackerman, who has Wave AI, and she's also a professor, but looking at AI and creating music. So with that, what we're going to do, you're in the right session if you care about the future of AI. And I am going to, well, I'll do this first. No, it won't. There should be a QR code. There's a whole bunch of resources that we've put together for you. I will find it. But let me turn the clicker over to Louis, who's going to take you through a little bit of what he's thinking about.
Yeah, but I can bring up the slide.
You got it.
There you go.
So yeah, I'm Louis Rosenberg. I am the CEO and Chief Scientist of Unanimous AI, also the Chief Scientist of the Responsible Metaverse Alliance, and the Global Technology Advisor to XRSI. And I've been involved in VR, AR, and AI for over 30 years, and so it's really an exciting time because these three technologies are actually coming together right now. It's also a really terrifying time to me, which I'll talk about as well, because I think there's a lot of dangers with the emergence of generative AI. Just a few really quick words about my background in terms of why I developed these concerns. Started in working in VR in 1991, down the street at NASA, worked in the VR lab at NASA, then went to the US Air Force and worked on mixed reality. The picture of me in 1992 before my hair went gray, developing the first mixed reality system at Air Force Research Laboratory. And at that point, I was pretty sure that it was going to be a technology that everybody would want to use. I just didn't think it would take 30 years. But I do think that on Monday, when Apple launches their mixed reality headset, it will maybe finally be the start of a mixed reality future. That said, I do think that this mixed reality future will be heavily involved with AI as well. And so I want to talk a little bit about my current company, Unanimous AI. We're actually a really different type of artificial intelligence company. Instead of using AI to replace people, we use AI to connect groups of people together, and we do it using the biological principle of swarm intelligence. Swarm intelligence is the reason why birds flock and bees swarm and fish school. They are significantly smarter together than alone. They actually become a superorganism. This school of fish can navigate the whole ocean. Nobody's in charge, and yet they can make good decisions and survive as a species. And so 9 years ago when we founded Unanimous AI, the concept was, well, if birds and bees and fish can get smarter by amplifying their intelligence, by working together in real-time systems, can people do it? Can we connect people over the internet anywhere in the world? And ultimately, can we do that in virtual worlds? And so what you see there is an example of an artificial swarm. Each of those little magnets is controlled by a person in real time. They can be anywhere in the world. They're controlling their magnet with a mouse or a touch screen or the handpiece on a virtual headset. And they're working together to push and pull on that glass puck using very similar interactions that schools of fish use and swarms of bees use. But there's an AI that watches all of their behaviors and determines the best path for that puck. And it turns out groups get significantly smarter. This is actually, that image is from a research study we did with MIT looking at groups of financial traders. And when they come together as a swarm, they can amplify the accuracy of their forecasts by over 30%. We had a study with Stanford Medical School, saw that groups of doctors could increase their accuracy when by over 20% when making diagnoses. So this idea of connecting people together works, and one of the things that's exciting that is really new is that we've now enabled this in virtual worlds. That's a virtual world called Xeon, relatively new. I highly recommend it, and we can now allow groups to come together and make amplified decisions in virtual worlds, make smarter business decisions, smarter forecasts. This is also works inside of Immersed, also a good platform. And so the philosophy that I come from is that we should use AI to amplify human intelligence rather than replace it, which brings me to generative AI, which the thing I worry about is it's a technology that could replace humans at scale. And the things that I hope we touch on during this panel is first of all, generative AI will allow conversational agents to become a very significant part of our daily computing lives, and that will replace human representatives in how we interact. There's a large number of significant dangers we should talk about. Generative AI platforms will also replace artists and writers and musicians. Human creators being replaced by AI, also a topic I hope we spend a lot of time talking about. And also generative AI is an interactive medium. It can create content in real time, which means advertising will become a different thing. Advertisements can be customized for us. So I hope we talk about that as well. And finally, one quick plug, working with the Mindaru Foundation and the XR Guild and the Responsible Metaverse Alliance, we just put out a film yesterday called Privacy Lost, which you can go to privacylost.org, see it. It's a 3-minute film that shows how mixed reality and AI, with generative AI, can compromise our privacy and actually manipulate humans. So I will encourage you to check that out after. And so that's, let me pass that on.
Thank you so much. And of course, the question on my mind is, can the swarm mind include chat AI bots? I mean, they are all going to share their collective intelligence, but we will discuss that. Next up, I want you to meet everybody and hear where they're coming from. So we're going to move down this line, is Gigi Johnson from Rethink Next. You can stay in your seat or...
And I'm short, so that's just not where I want to stand. I'd love to be able to see you guys directly, though. The lights are really bright. I am kind of two people in one. I'm a longtime media futurist at UCLA, where I was for 22 years, both running the Entertainment Media Management Institute and the Center for Music Innovation, and a longtime creative, interactive media producer, event producer. During the pandemic, created Amplify Music, a virtual conference, working with people around the world in local music communities to look at the pandemic. But I build stuff, and I build creative worlds, and I'm doing a lot of world building right now. And I look at this stuff as great, interesting, creative tool opportunities and marketplaces that still are to come to simply make sense of it all. So I'm enjoying, I was just at AI on the Lot 2 weeks ago that AILA created, really looking at how a lot of tools are already being used in film and television. And a lot of these tools I'm already using in world building. I love the Skybox tool that Blockade Labs has, where you can create your own Skybox to take into projects. And I've got it into Unity projects right now. I'm loving Kubrick, which is now looking to use Stable Diffusion to let people build virtual production spaces by slicing into layers and creating something that would have taken weeks of creative time and letting you create things. And I love just simple tools. I've been using Otter.ai forever to be capturing my creative work. And sadly or happily, people I'm working with right now are using ChatGPT to be trying to create gameplay, which I'm trying to get them to stop doing that, and how you can use tools to create your work. But I'm really concerned about what I've been seeing in other spaces that have been heavily leaning on these tools. So in the music space, which we're going to also talk about a little bit, we are now, pre-pandemic, we were at about 25,000 new tracks being created a day and distributed, which sounds astronomical. But with so many AI tools now built into a lot of music creation spaces, we were at 100,000 new tracks a day last year and 120,000 new tracks a day in the first quarter of this year, with not that much incremental revenue. So I'm probably concerned about job loss, but I'm really concerned about the fact that there's not the revenue to be able to support and the business models for discovery that are going to support some of these changes. And the fact that right now we have lots of poorly designed market spaces that are right now feeding from algorithms, but we're going to be dumping and creating fabulous and awful content that the revenue models won't be able to care for. So I'm glad to add my cynical market view that I think discovery is some of the real opportunity and trust environments, and that's not where we're coming from when we're creating all this new content and new job opportunities that are coming into the spaces. So I'll continue on that thread of market cynicism, but pass the baton.
Wow. So, yeah, and if you read this morning's paper, you know that for this morning's Whatever You Read, Minecraft has now incorporated ChatGPT. You know that Second Life used to hire people basically from China to play your role during the day while you were busy doing other things. Now you can have your chatbots playing for you, which has implications for the future of work that we'll talk more about. Now I want to go down and switch the conversation over to journalism for a minute, because there's an awful lot to learn that transfers over to worlds. David?
Hi. So my name is David Cohn. I'm on the research and development team for a company called Advance. Most people know Advance for the sister company Condé Nast and the Condé Nast magazines, but they also own a lot of news organizations, the Oregonian, the Cleveland Plain Times Dealer, the New Jersey Star Ledger. They also own 40 American City business journals, so like the Los Angeles Business Journal, et cetera. So again, I'm on the research and development team, and as you might imagine, we have now, fully embraced the opportunity and the whole threats and opportunities of AI. So as I'm talking, that's the kind of perspective that I'm coming from within media. But I think what I'm going to say applies to, I think, anybody in a knowledge job or information job. The three things that I'd say right now before we get into a larger discussion. The first is actually an analogy that I use talking about AI in terms of the way I want journalists to approach it. My mother was a secretary, and so she was amazing on a keyboard. I mean, she looked like a concert pianist versus my father, who, would kind of peck. The keyboard is an interesting keyboard. It was the typewriter. The typewriter is an interesting tool. It was actually invented around the Civil War, 1860s. But for the first 100 or so years, the average person was not very good with a typewriter. I mean, if you gave somebody in 1910 a typewriter, they'd probably be more productive with a pen and paper than they would with a typewriter. And I think with generative AI, something similar is going to happen. There are going to be people who will be very skilled at it, right, who will be like maestros, and then there will be people who are pecking. And so again, for journalists that I'm talking to, it's like, look, just as social media editor was a wholly new role that was invented essentially in the 2010s, AI prompt engineer is going to be a wholly new role, and there will be people who will be able to define their careers by being good at this tool versus others who will peck at it. Now, I do think that the time is going to be shorter than 100 years, right? Between now, by let's say 1995, around then, the average person started learning how to type, and I don't think it's going to take 100 years before the average person becomes, able to mess with generative AI the same way. But that's one thing. The other thing that is on everybody's mind is around jobs. I'm actually a little bit more bullish on this. Again, by way of analogy, when the ATM was invented, bank tellers all thought they were going to be out of jobs. They were going to be screwed, right? What ended up happening is that the cost of opening up new branches dropped, right? So you ended up with more banks, less bank tellers at each bank, but overall, there were actually more bank teller jobs. The number of bank tellers went up as ATMs came on board. And I could see something similar happening, again, speaking from within media and journalism. What we would consider a skeleton crew could operate in places that don't operate right now. So places like the New York Times or the Washington Post, they may see a thinning out as fewer people can do more and there is less demand for jobs there, but they may pop up in other places covering other communities or other topics that currently are ignored because, again, 2 or 3 people with AI would have the ability to do more. And then the third one is a little bit more on the skeptical, or not skeptical, but cynical side, which is, if you thought misinformation and disinformation was bad for the last 4 years, strap in, right? And it's not just that it's going to be more of it, which it will be, and it's not just that it's going to be more believable, which it will be, and maybe we'll talk about it more in depth because we talked about it before, but it's going to hit at an emotional level that we are not, that the average person is not fully prepared for, right? And actually, I think VR and AR is the perfect audience to understand that importance, because VR and AR hits at an emotional level that other media doesn't, right? But it's not really accessible to the average person. The average person doesn't engage with VR and AR on a regular basis. But AI, people will engage with AI without even knowing it, and it will hit in an emotional way. I mean, it will be tailored for them. It can be in the voice of your mother, right? Telling you that something is good for you or bad for you. And I think there is going to be a level of manipulation that, again, to the extent that media literacy has always been important, it will be important in a way that I don't know if we have the defenses as a society for it yet. So on that bummer of a note, I'll pass it.
Like I said, they would debate themselves over and over in this panel. So Maya, take us to music.
Hi. Hello. Is this working? Yeah? All right. My name's Maya. I am a professor at Santa Clara University and CEO, co-founder of Wave AI. in my parallel existence, which was never really supposed to be a big part of my life. I'm a musician. I sing opera, play the piano, and in my late 20s tried to write music, which I found to be just incredibly frustrating. I couldn't come up with vocal melodies, or rather, anything I came up with was sort of the same and sounded like an old folk song, and I hated it. And so for about 3 years, as I was doing my, kind of finishing up my PhD, doing my postdoc at Caltech in computer science and becoming a professor in computer science, while all of that was happening, I was trying to write songs in whatever free time I had. And it wasn't working. And in 2015, I discovered a field called computational creativity, which was a group of about 80 to 150 researchers, mostly out of Europe and the UK, who were considering whether machines can be creative. What does it mean to be co-creative together with the machines? What will machines do to human creativity? This was 2015, and they've already been doing it for decades when I discovered the research community. And I was floored. Why is nobody else talking about it? How is this not the biggest thing in the world? So I met 3 researchers in this field. I followed them around all day so I could figure out where I can learn more about it, and quickly change my entire life to be centered around computational creativity. It didn't take me very long to realize that I can build systems that would fix my songwriting problems. Essentially, what we built is we gave it lyrics and it would find different ways to sing them. So for example, generative AI will change the world. How many ways can you sing it? It's an almost infinite possibility space. How do you begin to even search in there? So you have a machine just showing you possibilities. It's like, oh, you can sing it, generative AI will change the world, right? That's one possibility. That kind of sounds too classical, right? Maybe we want something more hip hop or whatever. But if you have something that shows you the options and then you can just kind of have your eyes open to what the possibilities are. I still remember we printed these melodies on a piece of paper, no user interface, horrible, horrible notations. The notes were represented with numbers. And I would kind of pluck them out on the piano, and suddenly I could write music. Okay, we have something here. But I'm like a researcher and a musician. What do I know about business? So it took us 3 more years to get the guts to open a business from it after one of my friends, a professor at San Jose State, who is not a musician and does not speak Italian, wrote an Italian aria with our systems. And then it took a few more years to finally get the first working product called Lyric Studio, which helps people write lyrics. And we had managed to essentially bootstrap the product to millions of users well before the generative AI boom. And now suddenly everybody's talking about generative AI. Often, without taking advantage of the decades of knowledge that have been accumulated about it for years. And it's been really shocking to see what's happening. So first of all, since I have the mic, we need to kind of contextualize a few things. You can think about, I just wanted to kind of lay out 2 axes. So one is that any generative AI system can be presented to you as autonomous or completely co-creative, meaning that the machine can do 100% of the work and you're just there maybe like clicking 2 buttons. Or you can do almost everything and the machine can do almost nothing. And that's not about the AI, it's about how whoever is serving you the AI is deciding to give it to you, okay? It can also be made flexible so that you can ask the AI to do almost everything, or you can ask the AI to support you. This is something the world is very, very slowly waking up to. So the best example of that is Firefly. Adobe Firefly has actually done a fantastic job in its generative AI, where it's actually helping you be creative. I love Midjourney, okay? Midjourney, probably the best text-to-image model out there, but you feel so out of the loop. And this whole interaction through prompts is ridiculous. Okay, it is not the only way to engage with generative AI. It is talking to an AI in a way where you constantly feel like you need to somehow improve, you need to somehow find the right words. It is backwards. It is not the only way for us to engage with generative AI. Firefly is one example. My tool, Lyric Studio and Melody Studio, have helped artists. We had #1 hits on iTunes. We've had people write songs that have millions of listens, and there isn't a single prompt you can put in. In the same way, there is absolutely no need to use the AI to imitate anybody. You don't have to use it to imitate famous artists. You don't have to use it to imitate musicians. In fact, academics have not been focused on this use case, but because it makes a good marketing ploy, you see a lot of companies going this direction. It is a choice. Okay, people are choosing to use this technology to imitate people. It's very easy to block. We block it in my systems. You can't use Lyric Studio, Melody Studio to imitate anybody in any way.
I'm going to hold you there so that we have time for the audience to debate. So you've heard everybody's basic where they're coming from and the questions that they're asking. So now we're going to sort of do a lightning round, and the first topic is creativity. And yes, it's not a black and white answer, but do these tools make you more creative? And I'd love you to talk about the large language models beneath them, because we know that some of them go towards the stupidest middle point, just in what they're going to drum up and actually suck the creativity. I know with writing, I can tell you they suck the creativity out of, if you've used Grammarly AI, it actually gets in your way. More assertive, less assertive, shorter. Do you want to be funny? What do you mean, I'm not funny? So it's a tough one. So why don't you each give like a minute on creativity? And if somebody has something to say in the audience about whether you feel generative AI has made you a more creative person, we'd love you to stand up at the mic and testify.
Sure. So I do agree that generative AI can be used used by the general public in really creative ways. I think most people are actually pretty lazy, and they use what generative AI spits out for them. And it actually makes me worry about creativity from a holistic perspective. Again, I focus on large populations, and from a perspective of what is it doing to the creativity of humanity? I really do worry that these generative AI systems are actually looking backwards instead of looking forwards, because they generate content statistically based on the database it has from the past. And I know, the counter argument that people will give is, well, human artists are influenced by the past. They're influenced by other artists. But human artists do it very differently. A human artist is inspired by another artist, but then brings their own personality, their own temperament to their work. Midjourney is creating a statistical creation based on the massive database of examples it's trained on. It's not bringing its own temperament. It's not bringing its own personality. It's creating a statistical result. And in fact, the only reason that it's not exactly the same every time you put in the same prompt is that there's a parameter called temperature, which is just a little bit of randomness that's deliberately put in so that it doesn't look statistical, but it's statistical. And I worry that over time, it will make all of our art look the same.
Any counteractions in the audience? Okay.
Just a quick comment. So I had audio technologies at Berklee College of Music, the online division. So I think I have a pretty good perspective on some of this stuff for music specifically. I don't think Gen AI has made anyone more creative necessarily. I think it's making, when properly used, making them quicker.
Or I was going to say that, or sometimes being an accelerator for teams to be able to do better work. So you can take a look at everything everywhere all at once, use Runway for rotoscoping, took out many people and speed to be able to do phenomenal work for a smaller team. And so in many ways, it might make creators able to accelerate, do more work, et cetera. I'm not sure it's making people more creative, but you've got podcasters using Descript now to be able to carve up and do the mundane work faster and be able to edit text to then edit video and podcast work. I'm not sure it makes people more creative if they're not already creative. It does create a bit of a dumpster fire, though, of people being able to put out more work. There's a guy there. I can see him.
Well, I would love to counter what you're saying around Midjourney, and I really think the problem with Midjourney is that it's too good for lazy people to create good things. But I don't think it actually limits the creativity of the people who are actually pushing the envelope in terms of using references against references, building sort of rabbit holes down, creating actual personal style by blending styles and the rest, and really trying to come up with something that's artistic. And I think there are a small amount of people that are doing that. The problem is really with social media and the rest, giving credence to the least interesting, where it's how many different versions of Star Wars something can we get? And that's a problem with social media and humanity, giving credit to the unoriginal. And I think it's not actually, I think there is creativity and people pushing the envelope from Midjourney in ways that, you know, most people aren't.
And the sad part of the argument is in the K-12 space. This is where kids are getting their art history, their architect. I mean, this is where they're learning. Make me a photo in the style of Picasso. And they are actually learning from each other and learning from prompts. So it's a mixed bag. We have another audience creator.
An additional thought I wanted to share is I think a lot of the thoughts about Midjourney and how it's being used make a lot of sense, but I think the creativity that's enabled by AI is not so much the images we're creating or the text we're creating, but it's shifting the scope of what we can create. I mean, we're looking at huge experiences being built right now for VR and traditional gaming. The hundreds and thousands of people who are working on the newest Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption game, now those types of things can be created by one person. Now, that is creativity and at a scale and a scope we haven't seen before. And so, to me, it's more so thinking about what this enables and not tying ourselves to the output we had before. We can do so much more, and that's where people are going to thrive with this technology, in my opinion. I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, I want to play off of that and also zoom out, hopefully not too much, because you're right. I mean, like, if you think about the moment that we're in, you know, all of the history of technology has been this way of abstracting down to make it easier and easier for the average person, right? You used to have computers the size of a room, and you needed a PhD. Eventually it became a little bit more abstract again, keyboard, mouse, eventually it could be touched, and we all, you know, we remember these videos of like kids interacting, and we're like, oh, that's amazing, the kids. And now it is literally just the ability to speak, right? And so there's a Gutenberg kind of moment here where anybody who can talk can now have, you know, these are what was built by programmers and developers, totally inaccessible to me, and now actually the kind of interface, the input and output, is just your ability to communicate. But, and again, this is where I'm saying zooming out and hopefully not too much, I mean, people forget, the Gutenberg Revolution, which was amazing, also led to about 100 years of strife and war that could be absolutely traced back to the invention of the printing press.
And content theft with magazines. The people were just replicating.
And
each
that
other's
was
thoughts.
exactly content theft. But like, who cared about that? I mean, like, there was religious warfare as a result, right? Like for like about 100 years, right? But at the same time, you couldn't have had the scientific revolution without it, right? So again, not to say that we're, you know, I don't want to like, you know, over dramatize, but like there has been a shift in our in we have now abstracted. I mean, the only closer abstract would be straight up implants in your brain, right?
That's the next conference.
Right, exactly. But anyways, again, I that's maybe going a little bit too high, but it's kind of where my head went with that comment, so I thought I would share it.
We have another person at the mic.
So first, let me thank you. What a great opportunity to be amongst such scholars and insightful individuals. I think it's wonderful.
Here.
So I'm a business guy, and I don't look at AI, maybe I look a little differently. First of all, I don't look at it to boil the ocean. I look at it in segments. There's the research segment, and those people are greatly benefiting by using some of the generative AI just to at least bring themselves up to speed or whatever. There's the creative segment, and you literally segment the market. So some may use generative AI very effectively, and we should encourage that. Others, you might share some of the concerns you have, and you might have to put into place some sort of, and this is what I'm asking the panel, regulations, guidance, whatever, to make sure it doesn't get off on the deep end. But I don't think we're not boiling the ocean there. We're looking at segments of how this might be used, and I'd like your opinion as to what are the segments and how do we contain the worries that you have eloquently outlaid.
Perfect segue to our next lightning round, which will focus on both jobs and also, to go back to David's point, the ATM syndrome. Yes, it did create more banks, but it is likely that we will have companies run by 2 people and a bunch of chatbots within the next few years. And what does that mean to all of you? So let's switch over.
I can briefly comment. I mostly disagree with almost everything, just to entertain you a little bit here. The biggest issue, I mean, I agree in a sense of what I agree on your comments about what's happening right now. Too many tools are focused on speed and efficiency. I guess I disagree with the makers of these tools to target computational creativity and generative AI towards such mundane approaches. You see that a lot in the investment ecosystem, people thinking about this new technology in old ways. How do we use it to replace people? How do we use it to make things faster and more, I don't know, financially beneficial? But the opportunity here is much greater, and you do have tools like Firefly and like the tools that I've mentioned that I've built, which are genuinely designed to make human beings more creative. And until you try them and experience it for yourself, it's easy to sort of throw it in the same efficiency bucket. I'll stop here.
So Maya, put yourself in a corporate. They've got a job to do every day, and I think about this a lot. Should a person in a corporation get 20 minutes a day to experiment with AI? What would your advice, all of you, be to businesses to keep relevant as we speed through this?
So I work at a big company, and this is very much what we're doing. Again, I'm about 20% of my time now is on a task force that is thinking about this. And it is both the threats of it, right? Because again, media companies rely on something like search. So the idea that people are going to be using search and not clicking through to an actual source, but just relying on the prompt that comes back, which again, I would say is a statistical representation of an answer, not a real answer, but that's a side point. So that's, there's threats, but there's also opportunities, right? How can we do what we're doing? And I would agree with you. It's not that it necessarily changes what we're doing, but can we use it to make us do it better, faster, stronger, et cetera? I mean, again, from a business hat perspective we have to be talking about it. I think for the last 20 years, media and technology have been on a crash course. In fact, I usually say that in the future, technology companies and media companies are indistinguishable from each other. And traditional media companies either have to become technology companies or hope that a technology company builds platforms with our values in mind. And hope is a really bad strategy. So I think you have to be doing this because otherwise your just lunch is going to be eaten.
Hope is a bad strategy. Yep.
Yeah, so when I talk to people in my company and other companies about the impact of generative AI, I usually focus on the piece that is foundational that most people kind of ignore because they think of the ability to create documents and the ability to create artwork and the ability to create music, and they kind of jump over the key component, which are these large language models, which allow conversational interfaces with computing. And I actually think that is the single biggest impact that will have on how every company does business, because we're now at a point where computers can interact conversationally with anybody. We thought we were there a couple of years ago with Siri or Alexa, but that was really just you issue a command and the computer does something. We're now at a point with large language models where they can keep track of conversations. They can ask you follow-up questions. We will be, within the next 2 years, almost every major corporation will be having conversational agents that are representing them on their websites and other locations. Wendy's is rolling it out for their drive-thrus. This is going to change how people interact with computing in almost every way. And I think companies need to be prepared for that and think, how does that impact their business? I also think regulators and policymakers need to think a lot about the new dangers that emerge when people are interacting with computers conversationally, because people offer up much more information. If I go to a website and it gives me a survey, I will fill out a survey. I'll know that they're collecting information from me. If that survey is conversational, that survey can evoke far more information from me. And I'm not even thinking, it's storing all this personal information about me in a database because it feels human. And that's how we're going to interact with computing. It's a very significant change on privacy, and it's also going to be a new form of influence. These conversational agents will be a new way for influence campaigns. And they will be far more persuasive than sending somebody a document. And regulators aren't ready for this, policymakers aren't ready for this, and most companies aren't ready for this.
And let me pick that up. I mean, how many people here work in large companies? this crowd doesn't tend to necessarily know companies. How much of your time do you spend just answering emails and doing mundane things? Symbolic system manipulation
Post-it
just to
dial.
deal with the interior. There's companies now who've been going around for at least 5 years and doing analysis of companies saying, let me take what you used to have McKinsey spend 6 weeks looking at this system to see if it's needed. We can spend a day and say, these people aren't needed anymore. This system isn't needed anymore. And with so many companies now having a hard time hiring, they're really looking at, do we need most of these people to do internal systems manipulation? We're still at a state, I keep calling it the Lieutenant Uhura state, where you still have some leaders at companies. You need someone to look at the computer for you, interface with the systems, need an email printed out. And I think that you're going to have new companies forming that don't need that entire system inside. And we're going to start seeing a big shedding of internal manipulation systems. It's not just, hey, I can create something fun in Midjourney. It's, I don't need these whole realms of jobs anymore. And I'm talking to a lot of HR leaders who are really rethinking, what do we do with all these internal people who've just been manipulating human systems in companies? So that's my highly cynical view as to what our college grads will be doing next.
But
Going
then
into
I'm going to turn it down to Maya, because you talk a lot. When we spoke to prep for this, you talked about attribution and ownership. And why don't you speak for a few moments on your thoughts about what we have to do to give people their fair due in this new world?
Yeah. It's a really tough one, you know. On the one hand, I've had the pleasure of speaking with the people of some senators who are trying to make decisions about it, and there's a lot of effort out of Europe to try to just say, if you don't own the data, you can't train on it. And it seems so innocent and so almost unobjectionable. Like, you don't own the data, why are you profiting from it, right? And then Japan releases, yesterday or 2 days ago, releases a press release saying that they're not going to place any limits on AI in their country. And of course, it's not going to be just Japan, right? I don't think any of us are particularly worried about Japan in particular. And it's not just that countries might treat it differently. It's that if you have to pay for all the data to train on it, then we could count on less than one hand which companies are going to be able to afford to do that. Which means that the monopoly that Apple and Microsoft and Google and Facebook already have on our lives is going to get orders of magnitude stronger if there aren't smaller players who are able to afford to compete with them. So it's really, really, really tricky. The way that I view it is that, kind of back to an analogy that I think has already been brought today, which is around how the human brain works. I consume data that I don't own all the time. Sometimes I barely use it. Sometimes I'm sure that it ends up influencing how I think. Our brains are entirely consist of the data that we learned, right? Just organized in different ways through our neurons. And so the fact that I have the data in my mind doesn't mean I can go out there and write a song and claim that Taylor Swift wrote it, or do a whole bunch of other unethical things that I'm not allowed to do even though I can. And so what I've been promoting is to have a similar attitude towards AI. Just because it's capable of doing something doesn't mean that the company created should allow it to do it. So, don't make musical AI systems that pollute Spotify, for example. Like, really kind of basic thing. Or like, don't make musical AI systems that imitate artists without sharing the revenue with them and having their permission. So more of a kind of the way that we treat humans, maybe some of it is starting to become relevant for AI.
Really good. So we have like 1.5 minutes left. So I want to, for those of you who are working in the VR XR space, look at upstairs. The Kronos Group has the Metaverse Standards Organization. I don't know if you know about them, but they are free to join, from the smallest players to the biggest players, really trying to hammer out metaverse standards. I think that same rigor should be applied to AI, with stakeholders from all sizes, all sorts, all countries, not pretty, but hammering out the rules and the guardrails that I leave tonight to go do a talk about how kids should be introduced to AI. They already are. I mean, they make paintings and have no idea what they're doing. But last thoughts as we close up as to what we can do to kind of protect humanity.
So on that thought, because I'm a real, actually, like, big free speech, anti-regulation, like you can't, that's my tendency. And so my thought actually is that the responsibility is on the individual. Like I said, media literacy is important. I think media literacy is going to become incredibly important when it comes to AI. So I actually think it's more on the individual. Now, we can work together as a society, teaching children how to do it, but I'm actually more on that end than the idea of bodies regulating it.
So I'll take the opposite side of that, which is I think when it comes to AI, especially interacting with AI conversationally, the individual is outmatched. The individual is not going to be capable of understanding how easy they are to be manipulated. Because when you're talking to a conversational agent, it's like, and you could say, well, it's just like talking to a really good salesperson. Well, it's not, because that AI...
Every good salesperson.
Well, that AI could access information about you. It could know your interests, your political tendencies, your hobbies, and it will create a conversation specifically for you, and then it will also hear your reactions and work to overcome your resistance. And we've never dealt with that type of advertising or that type of influence, and we're about to enter an age where influence is adaptive, it's customized, and it's working to overcome our objections, and the individual is not prepared for that. Regulation needs to prevent manipulative AI.
Yeah, and maybe, but based on a lot of real world, like you said, the brain model. So we do have to wrap, but I know this will continue on. But we did make a cheat sheet for you. Is it on the PowerPoint? If you go to the very end of the first PowerPoint, there's a QR code. Can you guys do that in the back? My great
With
team.
resources and goodies.
Yeah, we have resources, videos, links to things. Guys in the back, on the PowerPoint, did it make it through the... Okay,
We just see lights, so it's hard to see.
It may have not made it through translation, but if you go to the virtual events group, which is my company, we have it up there as well. Just a bunch of resources from these folks and from other things, including probably 50 tools that you should be experimenting with. So I hope this fueled the conversation. I know there are a number, it's sort of like Apple being in the room, generative AI is in the room, even though they're not in the room. And so that I hope when we're here next year, we come to a deeper understanding. Thank you so much, first of all, to our panelists who are extraordinary. To our AV team and our track master for doing things, and to all of you for making time in your busy day for putting on your thinking caps a bit. Thanks so much.